Guys who are watching online, here's the link to the notes that we're going to be using today. Okay, so let's review really quick. We started last week, the why is there suffering? According to Hindus, according to Hindus, why do they say there is suffering? Karma. Okay, so I did something wrong in the past, so now I suffer for it. How about Buddhism? Attachment. Okay, so it's because I am attached, I have desires to things, and so that's why I suffer. Okay, for example, I love somebody, and that person makes a bad decision, then I suffer because I love that person, I'm attached to them. How about New Age? Yeah, so New Age says everything is an illusion. So even pain, suffering, there is no pain or suffering. Everything is just in your mind. You just have to control your mind. Okay? And then Islam, what would they say? Allah's will. Okay, it's God's will. Okay, for you to suffer. Or maybe you disobey God, or this is a test from Allah. Okay? How about atheists? Why would they say there is suffering in this world? Okay, no particular reason, right? It's not that you did something good or something you did bad, you offended God. No, they don't believe that. It's what? It's just random, and then it's part of your DNA. Okay? Your parents, sorry, you got bad DNA from your parents, and because of that, you got cancer. So that's on you. That's on you. Okay? You're sorry. And then some people just get killed in accidents. Just bad place at the bad time. Okay. So we said, number 2, why is the question of suffering a Christian question? Is it a Hindu question? It's not a Hindu question. So what I'm talking about, a question of suffering, is why does an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God allow pain and suffering? That's usually the question that people ask. Okay? Why doesn't Hindus ask that question? They don't need to ask God because it's their fault. So they don't need to ask, why God, why did you allow bad things to happen? Okay, how about for Buddhists? Same thing, right? It's their fault. They need to detach. So they don't need to ask, God, why are you doing this to me? I just need to detach. New Age, it's not that question because they don't believe in suffering anyways. Okay. How about Islam? Can they say, why God? They can because they do believe in a God who is all powerful, but they don't. Why? Yeah, because in their religion, it's not allowed.
It's haram.
Okay, it's all about surrendering in Islam. Okay, so you don't get to ask Allah why, or why did you do this? You're stupid. You cannot say that. Okay. How about an atheism? Okay, they don't believe in God. So who are you talking to? Why would you say, why God? Why did you allow this to happen to me if you don't believe there is God? Who are you talking to? Okay, and so that's why we said, okay, this question itself is a Christian question. Okay, and so we're going to try to get the answer from the Bible as well. Not because we're saying the Bible is better than other religions or Christianity is better than other religions. No, because this question itself is a Christian question. Does that make sense? All right. So we're going to get into the Bible. But first, before we dive a little bit deeper, I'm going to give you kind of a wide perspective of 2 different major views. Okay? Even within Christianity, there's 2 separate people. They're going to say 2 different things. Okay? Why there is suffering. Why does God allow pain and suffering? Okay? There's 2 major views. One is free will. Okay? I'm gonna go into a lot more deeper, but the basic idea is we made a decision. God made this world perfectly, but we made a decision. And because of our decisions, there's pain and suffering in this world. Okay? And there's another view called determinism. Determinism is this idea that God purposed suffering and pain purposely into our lives so that we can learn from those things, so that God could be glorified. So pain and suffering, it's not by our choice, but it's actually God wanting those things for us. Because if you look at, for example, look at all the points like we have grown the most, it's usually the times where we had most pain. Okay? So I'm going to go in much deeper, but I'm going to give you at least a definition of that. Okay, so discussion questions. Do we have free will, or does God determine everything? What are some of the Bible verses that support? If you believe in free will, then what are the Bible verses that support that? If you believe in determinism, what are the Bible verses that support that? Okay, so get together with people next to you guys, okay, and go over these questions together. Go for it.
So, number 3 and 4?
1 and 2.
All on that one. Do we have free will or does God?
Free will. We have a choice. What do you think? Because it's your choice. It's not, but so one of them is bad. It's your choice to try to get into heaven or not. So I think
Is it determined or God knows? I think it's different.
does it feel like God is determining the system?
I agree.
I don't know.
I'm more on free will side.
I think there's still determination that
But what if you,
but it's according
it's
to
just
my
an
free will.
illusion?
Yeah,
You just feel like you have a choice, but it's not really. It's a good illusion then?
Fundamentally, it's my
I'll show you a picture of later on how it could be an illusion.
Is it a matrix?
Yeah, what if we're in a matrix and we think we're making choices, but
Elon Musk said that there's a good chance that we're living in a matrix.
you know
Determinism kind of says, like, for me,
There's some Bible verses that support free will and determinism.
like very close to
there are verses that
I don't think
explains
God
about
only knows
he makes the way.
and he's not gonna affect
I think that's some sort
I
of
still have
and people could think
free will
that's
to make
that's
a
what
choice. But God already knows because he is all-knowing, almighty.
is Tracy doing the welcoming?
I don't know what she's doing. I thought she was coming in. She was talking with Todd's wife around Baltimore in future clothing.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Single bag right here.
I thought you were gonna give me 85. I'd rather have 85. Thank you.
Perspective? Like, I think it's both. It just depends on your perspective.
What do you mean? How can it be both?
Because, like, you have free will to choose if you're, like, enter the kingdom or not, right? It's like up to us.
Okay.
But then, like, I guess if you go with them, like, you'll determine your, like,
But if God determines it, how can it be our choice?
in the end, it's ultimately our choice. Whichever, like, route we go. Like,
Okay. So isn't that free will then?
that is free will.
Then how is it?
I
What?
think, like, it's not determination, determinism thing. Because it gives you, like, two choices.
So you don't. So it's more free will then, not
More free
determined.
will than, yeah. It's free will.
Okay. I just want to get clarification. Hi Tracy. Trace.
I made a comment on his haircut. Oh, you did?
She was the first one. Within 5 seconds, I told you.
Trace.
He walked in like, Kevin, haircut.
All right. Let's get to it. Okay, I would say, okay, when I talk to a lot of Christians, or whenever I ask this question, okay, most Christians deny determinism. They say, no, I believe in free will. But let me just tell you this. I would say most Christians and non-Christians, whenever they're talking about God and stuff, they behave like determinists. So it's really, really interesting. Okay? In their mind, a lot of people are willing to say, oh yeah, of course I believe in free will, things like that. But when I hear people's comments, okay, especially when people are going through suffering, a lot of them actually behave like determinists. I'll give you some examples. These statements, not all of it are determinist statements, but a lot of people use it like determinist statement. For example, if you say something like, everything happens for a reason, okay, it could be used both ways, but most people use this statement to say, yeah, this is God. God wanted this to happen. That's why it happened. Another one, God opened and closes doors. Okay, so I had 2 jobs. One worked out, one didn't work out. Oh, God. God opened this one, God closed this one. So God determines everything. There's no accidents. Okay, so very similar. Everything happens for a reason. Next one, God gives and takes away. Another one. Trust and know that God knows the best for you. Again, all of these can be used both, but most people use these when they're thinking about determinism. God is controlling everything. God is in control. Okay, I'm good. I'm okay. Everything's fine because I know that God is in control. They're saying literally God is in control of everything. Okay? And then obviously the biggest one, like I said, when people are going through suffering and difficult time, they go, why God? Why are they saying why God? Because God is the one who,
Gave you the free will.
okay? God is the one who, what?
Determined.
Determined those things to happen. Okay? So once again, most Christians deny determinism by words, but when bad things happen, they act like a lot of the thinking, it's actually determinist. Okay, so I'm going to present both cases, and I'm going to tell you why I lean more towards one side than the other. Okay, and I think it's biblical. Okay. All right. We'll start with free will first. Okay, this is when God is creating the world. Kevin, if you could read the first paragraph for us.
In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Okay, very good. And then Trace.
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
Okay, and then Josh, next one. God saw.
God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Okay, so we see clearly that, I skipped, by the way, some of the days, okay? So we see that God makes all of earth, okay, and the universe in 6 days. And then what does he say every time? He says, it is good, it is good. And then right here, he saw everything that he made, and then he said, it was very good. Okay. But what do we see? We see that God creates all things, okay, men and women, and he says everything is good. Okay, let's go to the next part. Abby?
The Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die."
Okay, so you see it here, right? You see God giving what? Free will. He's giving them a choice. Okay, he's saying, you could eat this, obey me, or if you, you don't eat this, but if you eat this, there is actually consequences for your actions. Okay, and so right here we see clearly there is free will to obey and disobey God here. Okay. Okay, so we know the story. So this is free will argument. So God creates the world, and everything is good, but he gives Adam and Eve a choice. He gives free will. And then we see what happens. Adam and Eve use their free will to what happens? They disobey God. And because of that, what are the consequences? What are the results? We know that broken relationship, first vertically, both vertically and horizontally. I gave a sermon on this about 2 weeks ago. So do you guys remember? They hide from God. Before they used to walk with God. But so now trust and relationship is broken this way. And then what happens? Adam and Eve, they blame each other. Well, actually, Adam did most of the blaming. Okay? So they start blaming each other instead of taking care of each other. It talks about how, woman, you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you. So again, there's this, before it's like symmetry of relationship, but now there's like they try to like control each other. Okay? We also know that because of Adam and Eve, death also comes into the picture as well. Okay? And the ground is also cursed as well, it says. Okay, so now we must work for food. And that's why work, we're gonna for the young adults, we're gonna do a series about work later. And that's why work can be very satisfying, but yet very, very difficult, even if you love work. I know like social media, it's like, hey, do what you love only. No job is like that. Why? Because the ground is cursed. So there's always going to be some frustration with work. Okay, does that make sense? And then there's also birth pain as well. Okay, so again, this accounts for a lot of the pain and suffering in this world. A lot of the pain and suffering comes because of the broken relationships that we have. Okay, and then like even politically and even like state and nations fighting with each other, it's a lot of relationship issues. Okay, and then it's a lot of wanting to control each other. Okay, and then we see even if suffering doesn't happen, we all die. Okay, all of these bad things are happening. Okay, so the question people normally ask is, why give free will in the first place? God, why did you even give free will in the first place? And then most scholars say it's because you have to understand the concept of love. Then you understand why there is free will. Okay, here's some love is like. Some said, love is like the wind. I can't feel it. Oh, sorry, I can't see it, but I can feel it. Okay? You guys like that one? Okay, next one. Love is like a rubber band held at two ends by two people. When one leaves. Some of you guys are like, I was on the other side. Oh, it hurts. Okay, but this next one, it really describes really well why God gave us free will. Love is like a fart. If you force it, it is probably poop. It was another word, but Sabbath school, you know what I'm saying? I had to use a different word. Does that make sense? It's saying you can't force love. You can never force love. Okay? So why give free will? Because love requires it. Okay? Those are if you take away the idea of free will, then the definition of love does not exist. Okay? So this picture, it's cute, but this is not love. Why? Because these are robots, they cannot move on their own. So there's two people controlling them. So this is not real love. Does that make sense? So when there is love, you can't never force it. Okay? It always has to be always has to be a choice. Okay? Now, C.S. Lewis, he's gonna put this in much more elaborated terms than I am. But if it's confusing, then don't worry. He's basically saying the same thing I said. Okay? We can perhaps conceive a world in which God corrected the results of this abuse of free will by his creation at every moment. So basically, let's say, maybe God created a world, there is free will, but then every time you try to do something bad, God changes it. Okay? Then he says, for example, so that a wooden beam becomes soft as grass when you try to use it as a weapon. The air refused to obey me if I attempt to set it in a sound wave that carries lies or insults. So I try to lie, or I try to say something bad, but I can't. Nothing comes out. Okay, so he says, so because people are like, why did God give us free will? Why doesn't God change things for us? Okay, so he's saying, imagine that kind of world. But such a world would be one in which wrong actions would be impossible. Because every time we try to do a wrong action, God changes it. In which, therefore, freedom of the will be void. So he's basically saying then there will be no free will. 9, if the principles were carried out to its logical conclusion, can we give some chairs?
If you guys can scoot a little bit and then move,
Here, I'll just... Morning. Can you give a couple more just in case other people can? Maybe 2 more? No problem. Okay, so the second paragraph, it's basically saying you want free will, but every time you make a bad decision, you want God to change it. He's saying that itself is not free will then. Okay, and he's saying you will find that you have exclusive life altogether. Okay, then again, we would all just be robots. The whole point of life is that we have choices, we have free will. That's basically what it's saying. Okay, so that's why God gave us free will, because we can actually choose to love and choose to have life. Okay, but that's one side of the story. Not every Christian, actually a lot of Christians actually don't believe this. Okay, they kind of believe in free will, but they believe God determines everything. Okay, what do I mean by that? This guy, his name is John Piper. He's a very famous, very famous Christian pastor. God not only understands the coronavirus, he has purposed it. Okay, so he wanted COVID to happen. God does nothing and permits nothing without wise purpose. There's always a purpose. Nothing just happens. Okay, this is classic determinism. That everything bad, every suffering that happens in this world, God wanted those things to happen. He purposed it because there's a reason behind it. You might not see it, but there's a purpose behind it, okay? So, some of you guys say, well, but no, there's free will. I choose, like right now I'm choosing to lift this up and put this down. And they would say, no, that's just the illusion of a free choice. Okay? So perhaps maybe it's kind of like this. You think you're making this decision, and so maybe you do, but in the end, you're only going out one exit. And God determined that. Does that make sense? All right, so again, most people, philosophically, they're like, no, I don't want to believe this. This is, no. But determinists, they use the Bible to actually say this. Okay, so let's use I'm going to give you two biblical examples of how determinists, they say, hey, God controls everything. All right. Do you guys remember a guy named Joseph? Okay. So his dad is Jacob. And Jacob, he marries two ladies. They're sisters. Well, he kind of gets fooled. He wanted to marry who? Rachel, but he gets fooled into marrying Leah. So he has to marry both of them. And then he has how many kids with Leah? 10. And then he has how many kids with Rachel? 2 kids. Okay. And then, so for a long time, Leah basically just like kid. And Rachel was like, come on. Okay. So Rachel finally has a kid, and his name is Joseph. Okay. And so Jacob, since he loves Rachel, not Leah, he loves Joseph. That's the favorite one. Okay. And then he even gets him.
They can't only boys.
What was that?
They have sisters.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. But who cares? We don't care. The Bible, not me. The Bible, not me, sorry. Okay. So, he very colorful, gives a very colorful robe. And we know, again, that this is very expensive because, putting dye and color into these kind of things, it takes a lot of time. Anyways, okay. One day, his brothers, who are all shepherds, they're away. Okay? And Jacob asked Joseph, Twitter was down that day, Facebook was down, so he says, go and check in on your brothers. Okay? So what happens? He goes and check in on his brothers, and then what do? They're like, oh, we don't like him, let's kill him. But one of them says, no, let's not kill him, let's make some money off of him. Okay? So, with 30 shekels, bye. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you pictures, and you guys describe to me what happens, okay? So he goes to Egypt, and then, you guys remember what happens? He's working as a slave. Do you remember what the guy's name was? Potiphar, okay? And then, dun dun dun. Okay, creepy. And then and then Potiphar's wife, so his master's wife, because he's such a good worker and probably good, young, good-looking guy, he's like, come on. Okay, Potiphar's not going to know. But he says no. And then he runs away, but she accuses him, he was trying to sleep with me. And then so he gets to, what happens? He goes to prison. Okay, long story short, the Pharaoh, who is the king of Egypt, he has a dream. And it's like, hey, tell me your dreams, tell me your dream, tell me the meaning of my dream. No one could know. But they call Joseph and says, hey, can you interpret the dream? And then Joseph in prison, he was working out, so he has six-pack now. Okay. And then he interprets the dream, and then what happens?
He became the second highest.
Yeah, he becomes the second highest person. Okay. Going back to Jacob and his bad brothers, there's a really bad famine. So there's no more food. But they hear, oh, hey, Egypt, they got a whole bunch of food. Why don't you go and buy it? Okay, long story short, Joseph sees his brothers, and then he tests his brothers, and then things like that. Long story short, they reconciliate. Joseph forgives his brothers. And happy, 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 happy. Okay, we're going to pick up the story from here. Genesis 50. Luis, if you could read this for us.
When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of God, of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said.
Okay. So Joseph already forgave them, but now that the father died, what are they thinking? They're thinking, oh, what if he was just being nice to us because dad was alive? But now that dad is dead, he's going to get back at us. So he's like, we're going to be your slaves. Okay, we're so sorry. We'll be your slaves. And then this is what he says. And this is where the idea of determinism, one of the idea comes from. Dan?
But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them.
Oh, do you guys see that? You see, you think, okay, you try to, sell me off or kill me, all of these things. No. That was good part of God's plan. You see, because why? If I didn't get sold to slavery and come to Egypt, then our family will be dead. Okay? You intended that, but you see, God intended it for good. So he knew this was going to happen. Boom, he planned it out. He planned out all of these things. You see, so even the suffering, because, Joseph goes through immense amount of suffering. Okay, he gets literally kidnapped by his brothers, get sold by his brothers, get falsely accused and go to jail. Okay, that's really, really bad. Okay, but he's saying, no, all of those things, God wanted those things to happen. Why? So that, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I saved the whole family because of this. Okay, this is what one pastor, who's also a determinist, he's very popular also. His name is Francis Chan. When he's talking about the story of Joseph, this is what he says. Joseph looked at the things differently because he knew who was ultimately in control. You see, God is in control of everything, determinism. This isn't about you. If anyone is guilty, it would be the Father. The Father decided this. The Father wanted this. This is part of Father's plan. I don't know why bad things happen to me, but it's all in God's bigger plan. You think things happen by accident? No, it's part of God's bigger plan. So if somebody cuts me off while I'm driving, God's trying to teach me something. Someone drives 20 miles per hour, God's teaching me patience. It's not them who's doing it to you. God has a bigger plan. Okay, this is classic determinism. Okay, God is in control of everything. Everything that happens in your life, there's no accidents. Okay, God wanted these things to happen so that God is wanting to do something. Okay, if you're not convinced, I'm going to give you one more example. All right, next one. As you guys know, again, Joseph becomes second, but so the Israelites, not Israelites, his brothers and everybody, they come, and then they're starting to grow and grow and grow and grow. But Joseph, he dies, and the Pharaoh dies. There's a couple hundred years later, they forget about Joseph. Okay, so what do? They're like, hey, there's these Israelites. Let's make them into slaves. They're these foreigners who have the best land, so let's make them into slaves. And so they become slaves, and there's a hero that comes out. Do you guys remember what's his name? Moses. And he says, let's start a rebellion against the Egyptians. But we know that it doesn't work out very well. Okay, so he runs away, okay, into the desert for 40 years. And then there, what happens? God calls him and says, hey, I want you to go rescue the Israelites. Okay, we're going to pick up the story from there. David, if you could read the next paragraph for us.
Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with my mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out.
Oh, okay. So God tells him ahead of time. He says, you're going to go, and you're going to do all these miracles. But guess what? Pharaoh he's not going to listen to you. Why? Because God, I will harden his heart. And so he has no choice. Okay, so God will touch his heart and make it into stone. So he's not going to listen. So again, it's part of God's plan. He purposely, okay, will harden somebody's heart and have them reject God so that other things can happen. Okay, so I give you two different stories. Okay, are you convinced now? And if not, then how would you explain? And if God were to be deterministic, how would it change the way you view God? Okay, have discussion questions, go for it with people next to you guys.
So that's one way that you can extend the importance of and then isn't that I was that's nice.
What if some parts are female, some parts are deterministic? Well, the philosophy classes about free will. And I always looked at like you're on a road and there's checkpoints. And at certain checkpoints, maybe it's determined that you can get there. But you may have free will, but you'll still end up to do certain things. Like, let's say God knows when you die. But he lets you determine, but you will die. And there's there's certain events where they're check marked. That's what I think. That means there are some free will, but there are some parts that are determined. Now I don't know which parts are these markers, but I see kind of like a little race where you have like certain markers. Interesting. I wrote a paper on this, that's why. I did a free will. I took a free will class where I learned actually more about this idea of sort of free will, but not really.
Because what Joseph said can be just like finding to make their brother, make his brother feel better. Like this is how God works. Just to make them feel better.
I thought it was kind of interesting that most Christians deny determinism, but most Christians favor determinism. Interesting.
Moses first, Pharaoh's heart from God. That sounds like that's
Okay, 30 more seconds. 30 more seconds.
Very dark.
I feel like if they were deterministic, let's say it's calculated all humans are kind of like
that means that. They're translating that expression.
All right. Let's come back. Okay. So this argument has been going on for a very, very long time. Okay. But I'm going to show you why I think biblically, and I use the word biblically because most people who are for free will, they just don't like the fact that God is deterministic. But that's a philosophical argument. Just because you don't understand how God could be loving and yet controls us, that's we don't know. Okay? So just because you can't explain it, that doesn't mean that it's not possible. Does that make sense? So, but most Christians that I talk to who are for free will, they don't give a biblical argument. They just say, no, God can't be deterministic. But again, you have to use the Bible. And that's why a lot of determinists, when they talk to free will, they go, okay, show me through the Bible. Because I showed you the Bible. I showed you the story of Joseph. I showed you the story of Pharaoh. You show me the Bible telling me there is free will. Okay? So I'm going to give you a biblical argument of why I think we do have actually free will. Okay? And that determinism is actually not biblical. Okay? All right. I'm going to give you a biblical argument. I'm going to give you the statement first, and then I'll explain more. Throughout the Bible, we see that God does not always get what he wants. Okay? God does not always get what he wants. So as you can see, this proves determinism then. Because if God controls everything, then why wouldn't he get everything that he actually wants? Does that make sense? Okay. For the sake of time, let's divide. Let me see. Oh, perfect. We have 4 tables. Okay. This table right here, you guys look at number 1. Okay, table number 2, table number 3, table number 4. Okay. So I want you to look at 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then show how these Bible verses show that God does not always get what he wants. Okay? So do this with your people next to you, with your tables, okay? And then one more thing, pick a representative to explain it to us, okay? How this shows, okay?
그가 이스라엘 이제 호렙에 들어갈 때 after Exodus they're talking to him, right? Before they actually go into Canaan, they're talking.
이스라엘 자손과 세우신 언약 외에 여호와께서 그들을 명령하여 그들과 세우신 언약의 말씀이 모압에서
You guys got it, or you need more time?
Just 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, one more minute. Okay. Okay, let's start from number 1. Representative, how does number 1 show us Jesus goes to his hometown? And then can you guys tell us what happened and then how it shows us that God does not always get what he wants?
What happened was he was only able to heal like a few sick people, not everybody.
Okay, why?
Like, he was a
Why?
because he was amazed by the lack of faith in their hometown.
Okay. So what does it show? It shows Jesus goes to his hometown. He wants to heal people, but they don't believe in him. So he could only do a few miracles. So how is it possible? Okay, how is it possible that if he wants to heal a lot of people that he can't? Does that make sense? Okay, next one. If you could give us the next example.
It's about it says he longed to gather his people
Yeah.
like a mother hen,
Yeah.
but basically they were not willing.
Okay.
About his prophets and messengers.
Very good. So he's talking about the Israelites and how he sends prophets and he sends all these people. So he gives an imagery of a mother chicken. Come here, little chicken, little chicks. But they're not willing. So again, it uses the word I desire. But they're not willing. So again, it shows you God's will, it doesn't always happen. Okay, next one, Isaiah 30. All right, Lysia.
So God is also trying to make his purpose on the people of Israel,
Yeah.
but they are unwilling.
It uses the one unwilling. Okay, so I want you to do this, but you are unwilling to do it. Okay, use the word will. Okay, same thing. All right, let's go to Deuteronomy.
Same thing, actually.
Yeah, same, very similar things, right?
He's basically giving them two choices. There's a good life, you can live forever with me, or you die.
Yeah.
And then he is begging them to choose
Yeah.
life.
Mhm.
Right? So.
And then we see in history that they don't.
Yeah.
Okay? So why, again, he's begging them, so he wants them to make this decision. Why is it that they continue to make something else? Okay? So again, this shows. I'm going to give you one more example. I'm going to go over it quickly. Daniel chapter 10, there's a story. So he's a prophet and he has a vision. So he decides to fast for 3 weeks because he wants more understanding. He wants more understanding. But for 3 weeks, nothing happens. He prays, but nothing happens for 3 weeks. Angel comes to him at the end of 3 weeks. And this is what he says. Do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you have set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. Oh, okay, so he's basically saying, the first day you started, I heard you. Okay, God already heard you. And God sent me to you. So why did it take 3 weeks then? Okay, but the prince of Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. 21 days, what? 3 weeks. Huh? Then Michael, one of the chief priests, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. So again, how is it that God sends his angel and says, hey, go, he wants understanding, go give him understanding, but he's delayed for 21 days. How is that possible? Okay, it's because, we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week, because we're going to see that there's actually a war going on between God and Satan. Okay? But right now, at least we see, hey, God does not always get what he wants. Or even if he does get what he wants, he gets it delayed. Does that make sense? Okay, so once again, we see that God does not always get what he wants. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. We have to understand, it's because God has limited himself. Okay, this doesn't mean that God is limited God. There's a difference between God, a limited God, and God who self-limits himself. There's a difference. Okay, he has limited himself. Why? Because he gave us free will. So because he has decided to give us free will, he has limited himself. Okay, so again, do you guys understand the difference between, I'm not saying God is not all-powerful. God is all-powerful. But he decides, when he interacts with us, not to use all of his powers. That's very important. Does that make sense? Because he has, for example, when I'm talking to my baby, Kurumi, do I use all my vocabulary with him? No. Because he doesn't, well, number one, I don't know how much he understands. Or when I'm talking to not maybe my baby, but like a little, maybe like Abby or Michael, like one of the kids, like I don't use big words. Why? Because they don't understand them. But that's not because I don't know them. It's because I have to, when I'm interacting with them, I have to lower myself, limit my vocabulary. Does that make sense? So when God interacts with us, he decides to limit himself. Why? Because he wants to give us free will. Okay? So that's why God does not always get what he wants. Even though he wants certain things to happen, we see throughout the Bible that it doesn't happen. Okay? So once again, we have to be very careful. Again, this can be used both by free will and determinism. But again, most people take this very deterministically. Okay, so God, everything happens for a reason. Okay, a lot of people, including me, a lot of people use this to say, you see, God made this happen. Okay, all of these statements here, for me, I try to avoid these sentences. Even when I'm talking to non-Christians. Not because a lot of people take this to mean that God controls everything. So we have to be very, very careful. Okay, someone explain, I'm going to end with this. Somebody explains this very, very well. He's a SDA pastor. He says this, everything that God does is an act of love. But not everything that happens is an act of God. Hi, my baby. Hi, my baby. Everything that God does is an act of love, but not everything that happens is an act of God. Okay, but that still doesn't explain, okay? How do we take this Bible verse then? Of Joseph. He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for all good. Okay, how do we explain that? Well, this is actually really, really simple. If you want to look at it deterministically, then you're gonna read it deterministically. But if you actually read this free will, then you could actually read this free will. Okay, this is not 100%. Okay, for example, you intended to harm me, so you intended bad things to happen, but God was able to still bring good things out of it. Okay, another example. This one doesn't make sense because Joseph says at the end, he says the reason why God did all of this was because he wanted to save a lot of people. Well, if God wanted to save a lot of people, it would have been easier to just give them rain. If God controls everything. Does that make sense? But maybe God had to go through all of these things because of the different free wills that were happening. And this was the only way he could save them. Does that make sense? So again, God was able to still bring goodness out of this situation. Maybe that's what Joseph is saying. Okay? This one is a harder one. Okay? God can harden. Okay, remember Pharaoh's heart? So a lot of people actually take the stance like, oh, maybe the Hebrew writing, it was just like a euphemism. Or maybe the people who translated, they translated it wrong. Okay, that's possible, but that's very dangerous. Because if you do that with that verse, then you could say that for every single Bible verse. Does that make sense? There's an easier method. Okay, look at here. Okay, this is a sun, and there's two different objects. We have the ice, and then we have, imagine this is clay. Okay? So what happens? The sun, when it reflects onto ice, what happens? It melts. But then when the sun reflects on this clay, what happens? It hardens. Okay? Okay. So we see that God is just explaining, this is just a language issue. Okay? God is just saying, when I act upon Pharaoh, because his heart is a heart of clay, it's going to harden. So he's just telling him what's going to happen. If he had a heart of ice, no pun intended, okay, he would actually melt. Okay, but because his condition, he's just telling him the condition of Pharaoh's heart, which was clay. But if he had a different heart condition, then he would have reacted differently. Okay, so this is not, you don't have to take this like, oh, God is changing his heart. It's just, he's actually just describing the process of what's going to happen. Okay, one more thing. And then I'll finish. Now, this stuff, it's going to get a little philosophical, okay, and it's going to get a little hard. But so if you can't understand it right away, then no problem, okay? So the basic idea is, how do we have free will if God already knows what's going to happen? For example, with Pharaoh. Okay, he already knew that Pharaoh was going to harden his heart. How's that free will? Another example, what's his name? Judas. Okay? We already knew that Jesus already knew Judas was going to betray him. Then how's that free will? Okay. We have to understand there's a difference between prescriptive and descriptive. Okay, prescriptive is exactly what we think of, which is because somebody said it, it will happen. Okay, that's kind of like determinism. That's prescriptive. That's like determinism. Okay? But descriptive, okay, it's just explaining what will happen. Okay, I know they kind of seem similar, but let me describe, okay? Okay, for example, I know that tonight sun will set. Okay, did I make that happen? Did I make the sun go down? No, that's descriptive. Does that make sense? I'm just describing what will happen. Okay? Today, I'm going to drink water. Or by the end of this week, every one of you guys in here will drink water. Oh, did I determine that to happen? No, I'm just describing what I know will happen. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's kind of the concept, but there's always like exceptions to the rule, because what if like the sun gets destroyed somehow? Well, we will die too, but what if the sun gets destroyed and it doesn't set? Or what if somebody is fasting in here and they don't drink water? Then I'm wrong in that sense. Does that make sense? Okay, so we have to understand there's again, this is not biblical. This is 100% philosophical, but we're just trying to understand what if God sees time differently than we do. Okay, for example, for us, we see time in a linear perspective. Okay? But what if God sees time not in a linear perspective, but in a circle. What I mean by that is, what if God sees time, he's in the center, and God sees 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 8 o'clock, all at the same time, at once. So he's just able to see what happens to us, or what we do at 8 o'clock when it's still 3 o'clock. And he's just telling us at 3 o'clock what we're going to do at 8 o'clock. So it's descriptive, it's not prescriptive. Or it doesn't have to be. Okay? So again, I know that's a little confusing for some of you, but that's the best way to understand it. Okay? So just because God knows some things ahead of time, that doesn't mean that it's prescriptive, that it has to happen that way. He just knows what we're going to do ahead of time because he sees time differently. Okay? And then some people say, but what if I chose differently? What if Judas didn't betray? Then Jesus would have known a different scenario. Yeah. Okay, so he only knows what we're going to do. Okay? I'll give you one more example and then we'll end. Imagine if we take all of us, we take a time machine. Okay? And we go 1 year from today. And we're on the time, we're all of us in a big time machine together, and we're looking at ourselves. We go, oh, okay, Kirin is doing this. Oh, Hannah is doing this. Oh, Josh is doing this. Okay, Richard is doing this. And we come back. Okay, now we know what Kirin will do in 1 year. Does that make sense? But did I make that happen when I was in the time machine? Did I make that happen? No, I just see it ahead of time. Okay, and again, if you really think about it, there's a whole bunch of other, well, maybe you came back and that's why you changed scenarios and things like, okay, we're not talking about that, but I'm just giving you a model of which we know something, but that doesn't mean that we determined it to happen. Okay? So understand, again, if we understand it, not prescriptively, but if we understand that God is just describing what will happen to us, then again, it is possible that we still have free will. God just knows ahead of time what's going to happen. All right, let's get into our discussion questions, and then we'll wait until 12 o'clock for our worship. Okay, go ahead.
Or any of
He never considered that choice of free will.
It's like free will difficult. That's it.
Did your What was interesting? What was the most
Free will. Did you think that? Or did you think it's I think I kind of, the idea that God sets up time and I think that that's really interesting. I think that actually makes sense. Knowing something will happen doesn't mean that it can. I know. Knowing that it will happen doesn't mean that you'll control. I mean, it's almost kind of the way I was describing it. If you know it's going to happen, but he's not actually forcing your hand to get to what's happening. So, for instance, we know that we're going to die in 1 year, but he does not control it. He just knows it's going to happen. But he doesn't have to control you to it. It just has to know. Or both. I wish you were here, Grace, because you could have 5 different things. I predicted it, man.
I still have my dogs that are here from them. So I think that's of course determinism is not.
Yes, sir.
How's the series so far?
Good,
Is it
good.
answering
I think this is
some of the
very
questions you have?
very thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Especially just free will stuff and all. So you're saying that the Bible is free will? That's very interesting. I do like the idea of God having a different sense of time than we do. It kind of, I think that does make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. We're not sure if it's exactly like this, but
But that's an idea.
yeah, hypothetical. That's
Hypothetical.
yeah.
Interesting.
How do I know?
We have more stuff coming.
That's your wish.
Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah. Richard came in, so I'm really happy. He's just asking me about my week.
Yeah. Are you
Yeah,
are
no,
you staying here
man.
or what?
I'm living here right now.
When did that start?
Monday?
Oh, nice. Are you living in Lizzie's room?
We'll call it, soon it'll be called Richard's room.
Richard's room.
It won't be Lizzie's room anymore.
Cool. What happened to Steven?
Yeah, he's in Cali. His living situation wasn't that very good.
I see.
So I think he just decided to.
So we forget about it. And then we say why are you actually, letting this happen to me? We
4 years
complain and
from
we
your
kind
like
of
8 years and another 8 years of training. I think that's
feeling. But that's not it. So
There's this thing right here.
talking about
That's
I don't know, but like
guitar tuning. So like before, they used to have like a sound tuner, like so we would have a speaker and then it'll hear it, and then now these you click it on your guitar, it vibrates. Yeah. So depending on vibration, it knows the keys. It's cool, huh?
That's very cool.
Yeah. Cool technology.
Very cool.
sometimes I believe that I know that there are people that pray for me. And then my mother and sometimes I ask myself, like, can you pray for this? This is in my church. And then I'm telling you, a month later, I forget about it. I just keep it. But they usually transfer me. And then it happens because of that. Not because of me.
My freshman Your back hurts? Is it okay? Huh? That's helping? I mean, it should ease your, because like your muscle is very tight because it's loosened. So even though you don't have a muscle ache, like your back is probably tight, and that's probably helping it to like loosen a little bit. So. But after that, it'll feel really good. Yeah. He's really good. And then it's no needle, so it's just.
don't look at what are the choices.
Are you free will or determinism?
I think Bible shows free will.
Why these people not educated? Why me?
Like the first story, right?
What was that?
Like the first story in the Bible.
Yeah.
Why does it matter?
Why does it matter? Because number one, how you perceive God could change. Like I know a lot of people who are in the hospital or when they go through a hard time, like they're very bitter towards God.
We started 12.
12. Or they end at 12, so we try to start like 12:10ish.
Try to apply some, when we stop. When we're not stopping, once you stop I think it's really important that we try to find out.
I think so. I mean, they were already given. They were. I think they just lost it. Oh, who? No. Remember when we had our service? They all got keys. They did that.
Did they? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just got lost.
Did you lose your key then?
No, I just don't carry.
Oh, you have?
Like Sarah has it. Like Danny has it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
Did you want a key? I thought you had a key.
No, she does. She wanted to make it for you guys. She thought you
I don't have
didn't.
one.
Oh, you don't have one. Oh, we'll get you one.
I
Yeah.
thought nobody had one.
No.
Oh, we all do.
Oh.
Yeah, you're not special, Tracy.
No, Tracy, Tracy, you're very special. Oh, we'll get it for you.
No, it's okay. I could go make my own. I was gonna make one, but the thing was, I was like, oh, I wonder who else needs one. That's why.
Don't you need a key to make a key?
I
I
know.
know.
She's like, I'll make it somehow.
I'll make it out in there.
I'll use my connections on her.
Pick one key.
You wanna take the key and
Oh, yeah. I'll make one.
Don't lose it.
Yeah, I hate to. No, keep yours. I'll ask someone else.